out of the training and a couple others who are going to be absent regardless of the traffic. Just a reminder, we're still on candid camera for another week, so act accordingly. And we are going to take our agenda a little out of order. I want to respect Senator Kramer's time and bring him up to the bill hearing on MC/PG 114-19. Senator Kramer. And keep in mind, Senator Kramer, no one has signed up in opposition.
I hope the delegation will keep that in mind, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, delegation. Ben Kramer here, introducing MCPG 114-19. And I have a panel, Mr. Chairman, if I can ask them to come up and offer some quick information about the legislation. The purpose, Richie, did you want to come up? Or? The purpose of this bill is to create a new bargaining unit within WSSC. The purpose of the legislation is to create a new bargaining unit within the WSSC. The way the bill is drafted was the work product of the WSSC. Thank you very much to the Commission. And ultimately, this is something that has been working through the process with the Commission and our good friends at the Teamsters Union. And with that, I have the outstanding president of the Teamsters with me here, and Mr. Richie Brooks will be happy to give you a little brief information.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today. My name is Richie Brooks. I'm president of Teamsters Local 730. We've been working on this organizing campaign for 2 years. Some of the workers there had come to us about becoming part of our union. Matter of fact, we have one right here, John Goodman. And right alongside him, our Secretary-Treasurer, Tyrone Richards, has been helping me with this also. For the last 2 years, we've been meeting with the workers. We went and met with WSSC, Carl Reed, Jackie Vincent. To my understanding, they had no issue with this. When we had enough cards last April to file a petition, we filed it, but then we found out the unit had to be bigger than we thought because of the way the law was. Some of the people in this unit that we would have to organize, we can't have because of the conflict, like HR people, things like that. You can't have an HR person. There's a member of mine sitting across from a meter reader. So we asked how we had to do. We have to get the law changed. That's why we're here today. It's not about money or anything. The workers just want representation for some of the way they're treated there by the WSSC lower management. And so then I approached Senator Kramer, and that's why we're here. And we hope that we go ahead and pass this bill for us. Thank you.
Any questions for the panel? Terrific. Well, thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Brooks, for coming.
And since this one is easy peasy, Mr. Chairman, if you just want that, you got the delegation here, you want to vote it out now and save everybody a lot of time.
I think with Chairman Carr, who runs that committee, not here, we should probably round up the committee. And it'll
Fair enough.
Probably work done next Monday night. I know someone from WSSC is here. Did you just want to briefly say something?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Guy Andes, Government Relations Manager for WSSC. WSSC does not, the Commission does not have a formal position on the legislation. However, the General Manager will be making a recommendation to the Commissioners of a position of support. I have our General Counsel here, Amanda Kahn, to answer any questions about the bill if you so inclined to ask.
Any questions for WSSC? Terrific. Thank you. That concludes the bill hearing on MC/PG 114-19. We'll now go back to our regularly scheduled programming and bring up Montgomery College, Dr. Pollard and Chair Knapp.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, delegation. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you again this morning. I am here this morning in my capacity as chair of Montgomery College, and I'm with Dr. Pollard, our rockstar president, who has just recently returned from sabbatical, and we're so happy to have her back. As you know, Montgomery College is one of our linchpin institutions in the community. As we look to grow economic opportunities for our community, and in particular for our residents, Montgomery College is uniquely situated at that pivot point. If you're someone coming from high school and looking to move forward and going to college, if you're looking for someone who's going back to work and need additional skills, if you're looking for a certificate to be able to move into a particular job, if you come here from another country and need to get assistance with language skills or need to get recertified in various activities, this is the place where all of those things can occur. And it really becomes the bedrock for how we're going to continue to grow as a community. We know we have the highest education attainment of any jurisdiction in the state, but the reason we have that historically has been people have moved to Montgomery County from other places. We know that with the ability for people to be anywhere and businesses to be anywhere, that level of in-migration isn't happening quite the way that it once did, which means for our economy to grow and for our residents to be successful, they've got to have the skills to ultimately be competitive in the workplace. And Montgomery College is the place that occurs. And so we as a board and we as an institution are really focused not on just presenting and providing those skills and resources, but also really working to try to make sure that we're meeting our residents where they are and providing them the tools and however they need to do that. We're working very hard to help them overcome the barriers, not just academic barriers, but all the other social barriers and the economic challenges that they face to make sure that they can begin college or acquire whatever they need to do and continue to be retained and continue to be successful, whether that's getting that certificate, getting enough credits to be able to transfer to a four-year institution or ultimately graduate, whatever that happens to be. So we are very appreciative to your support for the College Promise Program. That certainly supplements a lot of the activities we've put in place. We appreciate your support very much for the Isaiah and Catherine Leggett Master Science Building. That allows us to provide resources to those students in actually state-of-the-art facilities, which is much better than the 1950s four-year-old buildings that we're in right now, which don't really provide us the capacity to be able to train them to compete readily in the workforce and the jobs that we have. And so we really appreciate your support to date. We know that generally we are in a fond place with each of your hearts. We just want to make sure that we're in front of you and can answer any questions you may have. And at this point, I will turn it over to Dr. Pollard, who will actually tell you to deal with substantive things. So thank you very much for the time and attention.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your leadership on our Board of Trustees. And good morning, everyone. Delighted to be here on this wonderful snowy morning on the way up from Montgomery County to Annapolis. I was reminded that you all have to make this journey far more frequently than I do. So I'll be thinking about you the next time I'm on the road and the snow starts. But I would be remiss, today is February 1st. Happy Black History Month as we get ready to start an important period for our country, remembering history. It also happens to be my father's birthday. So he's here visiting with me, so we get to have a little birthday party tonight for him. With that, Chairman Corman, thank you so much for having us here today, members of the delegation. Contrary to what he suggested, Mr. Knapp offered a wonderful insight to much of what I would have said and will say here. But I will offer those a few perspectives, particularly about the students that we serve. And many of you know them. You provide scholarships to them, you hire them, you spend time with them, and certainly when they're here in Annapolis, you spend a lot of time talking with them. And I have to tell you, that is always one of the highlights of their year when they get to come here and tell you their stories about why they choose Montgomery College and why it continues to be of best service to them. You have been tremendous in helping to support our mission and ensuring that we're able to provide post-secondary education options to the residents of Montgomery County. Because of you, our mission of empowering students to change their lives, our mission of enriching the life of the community, and certainly our mission of staying accountable for the results we produce are certainly indebted to the work that you all do each and every year here in Annapolis and elsewhere for our students. Students that I think you know well, but I like to tell you, because when you're thinking about the decisions that you have to make, perhaps a few names will stay in your mind. Glenn, Avanti, Kevin, and Kim, who are tremendous graduates of Montgomery College, but their stories belie, I think, the pathways that they have to go to get here, and more importantly, why we are oftentimes the first, second, third, and fourth choice of educational options for students in Montgomery County. Glenn, a veteran who turned to Montgomery College after serving in the U.S. Army, who is now at 26, attends University of Maryland after earning his business degree at Montgomery College. Avanti, a recent high school graduate, enrolled in Montgomery College for support and education that she knew she needed. She knew that she was not ready to go away from home. And to her goal is to become a physician's assistant because she wants to help people right here in her own community. As a 20-year-old now, she's pursuing her bachelor's degree at Towson University. Kevin, an apprentice who got on-the-job skills training that's required for employment, and today at 27, he works as an HVAC technician in Rockville. Happen to know that he is getting a lot of business right now as he is helping to keep people warm. And finally, Kim, an immigrant from Vietnam who attends Towson University at 22 so that she can reach her goals of becoming an accounting professor and owning her own math learning center here in Montgomery County. So all of these students fill us with pride, but what they tell us and what I know about all of them is that Montgomery College is Montgomery County. These students whose lives I just briefly alluded to are students whose experiences are like thousands of people who live in our county each and every day who come to Montgomery College pursuing their portion of their American dream. And because of you, they have the opportunity to do that. The policies that you set, the budgets that you've set, the legislative decisions that you've made have allowed Montgomery College to be a place where the county can count on. You kept us high quality, you've kept us affordable, and more importantly, you've kept us in the forefront of decision making that you make about the needs of our county. Because of you, the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship Program, which is receiving lots of information and lots of touting right now, it came out of the legislature. You all knew that there was a profound need for students to be able to have access to higher education, and thankfully you all have also ensured that dreamers are able to take advantage of this phenomenal legislation. You also made state scholarships available to dreamers. Community colleges for the first time will have access to funds to address aging buildings on our campuses. We know that this is something that we don't take for granted, but we're grateful to you for advancing the legislation to make that happen. And then finally, legislation that you outlined in 2014 is bearing fruit. The Germantown campus of Montgomery College was recently designated as a RISE zone, a regional institution strategic enterprise, and this designation will allow us to ensure that this campus, home to our PIC-MC Tech Park, will have a hub of education, employment, and entrepreneurship, while also providing students with advanced market-ready knowledge and skills and facilitate economic opportunity in our county. Because of you, we have been able to address the opportunity gap in your support of our ACES program, your support of making sure that all means all, as our county superintendent says, and certainly recognizing there's an imperative that we continue to do the work that we must do to ensure that every student has access to us. The other thing that I would offer to you is that the work we've been doing with our early college and middle college programs have been a direct result of the work and support that you've provided in providing pathways from Montgomery County Public Schools into Montgomery College so the students are able to accrue college credit prior to coming to college. And clearly we know that if we can shorten the time to completion, if we know that we can make it economically sustainable, more of our Montgomery County residents will pursue post-secondary education. And then finally, because of you, our Catherine and Isaiah Leggett Math and Science Building is underway. As Mr. Knapp mentioned, you will provide and ensure that every resident who attends a Montgomery College campus, regardless of campus or location, will have access to state-of-the-art science and math facilities that are representative of what we want our economy to be in Montgomery County. So we ask that you continue to assist as this project moves forward with approval for construction funds that is planned in this year's budget. These students that I mentioned earlier, the support that you've provided for us and to ensure that all of them have opportunities is exactly why I continue to be proud to live in the state of Maryland and more importantly to live in Montgomery County. Many of us choose to be here for lots of different reasons, and I think each of you have chosen service for lots of different reasons. But at the end of the day, I think all of us together, the delegation members, the college, we believe in enhancing the quality of life in our county and our community, ensuring that no one gets left behind. Thank you for letting the college be a partner in that, and I'm certainly happy to respond with Mr. Knapp with any questions or receive any comments that you'd like to share with me at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Pollard. Delegate Lopez.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
And, it's always a delight to see 239 residents here in Minneapolis talking about one of our great upcoming current commission is pushing college and career readiness. And in just a general sense, or perhaps as specifically as you'd like to get, how do you think that's going to impact enrollment or academic programming at Montgomery College in the years to come?
So right now, the college is actually engaged in a very intensive strategic planning process. Our current strategic plan ends this year, and we're in the process of developing a new one. And part of what we know is that the demography of Montgomery County is changing significantly. We are gloriously diverse, as I like to say, and as a result of that, we have to be intentional in making sure that we have pathways for any resident who wants to come to Montgomery College, that we've built those pathways, that we understand the choices the students have to make, and more importantly, that we have options for all students to come. So we're actually very happy that MCPS has articulated this idea of career and college readiness. Certainly the current commission is lifting that. We like to think they're all catching up to community colleges because we do this already. We specialize in providing transfer level education, but also we have education for students who need short-term certificates or who want to go directly into the world of work. Our concerns in this continues to be probably the same ones you would have about ensuring alignment from K-12, alignment to the community college, and the quiet secret in this, the alignment to the four-year institutions, because we want that pathway to be seamless. The other concern that I would probably say is the one that you all also share is how do you fund this? Because one of the things I don't want to have happen, where half of the undergraduates in the state attend a community college, the funding that comes to community college is not representative of that. So we want to assure when we believe deeply in the K-12 system, we're dependent on their success. We are also very much believe that we don't want us to get left or lost in that. I mentioned earlier our facilities. We have considerable issues. We have roughly $60 million for all community colleges on capital projects. That's phenomenal, but there's 16 community colleges who have deferred maintenance needs that far exceed the resources that are there. So we often wonder how these things will play themselves out in terms of cause and effect. We stand ready to respond to the current commission and other things that exist in terms of the changing demography, but we will be keeping an eye on what the implications might be for us. And thank you for the question.
Any other questions? Delegate Wilkins.
It's so good to see you. Welcome back from sabbatical. As we were sitting here, you know, I'm a huge fan of Montgomery College and very proud to have a campus in District 20. And one of the things that I was thinking about is how we can better partner with the Montgomery College to have more interns, for example, here in Annapolis in the legislative session. I know I've had a lot of University of Maryland interns from University of Maryland, but I really love to have more of the MC students. So for example, University of Maryland has a bus that takes students back and forth, so that makes it a little bit easier. Just wanted to put that out there for all of us to just sort of think about so that we can kind of figure out how we can better facilitate that. I know a lot of my the students at the Tacoma Park campus don't necessarily have cars or transportation, so just wanted to flag that for us all to just kind of work on together.
I welcome that and thank you. As you know, particularly our students at our Tacoma Park Silver Spring campus are politically woke in ways that are a revelation and energizing, and they would welcome the opportunity to serve in these capacities. They are hungry for it. I think the challenges you described is transportation. I also think in terms of when you think about how you may write your job descriptions for internships or when you articulate or message about what you like to see, I would just encourage you to make sure that the language doesn't make them feel that they aren't welcome in these spaces. Because I know for a fact they would absolutely love it. And also I want to thank a number of you teach or guest speak on our campuses. You bring real life experience to the policies that they're studying, to the history, the political science. So thank you for that, because our students, they really treasure that, and they get to see you in their community and know what you do each and every day. So thank you for that.
Just one piece to add to that. I know many of you use your scholarships to provide access to the students for school. One of the things that we've actually begun to do at USG is to provide scholarships to students so they can actually do internships, since many of our students are actually working, and in order to work or do an internship, now you're making a choice between one or the other, and oftentimes the internship loses. And so to think, I don't know if there's a way to do this, think about how to use those scholarship resources to provide, if it may be a way to potentially supplement their activities so they actually could intern.
Delegate Shetty?
So the General Assembly internship program is funded, so our office is providing part of the stipend, and the General Assembly provides part as well. So, you know, and I know in some of the other university cases, there are intern coordinators that partner with the General Assembly to try and help serve as liaisons to help students navigate the process. But I know there are many of us who would love the opportunity to work closely with you all on this.
Dr. Solomon.
Thank you for being here. As a time to not only spend in Rockville, but out in Germantown. Love your students. Actually, echo with what my colleagues said. We had an intern who was going to be out. Transportation was an issue. Just had a question, wondering, I've heard some concerns about some of the increases for some of the employees at NC. Is there more that you can do to make sure that, you know, we want to make sure obviously it's affordable for students, but we want to make sure that we're paying, you know, the support staff faculty appropriately. Is there anything more that you need from us down here to make that happen?
Well, first of all, let me first speak to the rhetoric. There has not been a pay freeze for any employee. In fact, every employee has received salary enhancements for the last several years. Where you may see some differences, we did move to a system where we are a market-based system, so we ensure that we're being fiscally prudent with the resources that we have, and that we are also being thoughtful about what's reasonable based on the market that we have in this environment. So some employees may be at the top of scale, maybe ones who may be adversely impacted, they may be limited to the amount of resources that they may see coming in future checks. That being said, I always welcome the opportunity to talk with you about how to secure more resources for community colleges. Mr. Knapp and I were just actually talking about this last night. The master plan for higher education in the state of Maryland had intended it to be a third, a third, a third. A third from the county, a third from the state, and a third from students. What has typically happened is that third from the state has never truly actualized. So the county has picked up more resources, and at times students have done that. So time to time, you all have also brought down and invested additional resources. Different governors and different legislations have done that in order to ensure the students don't have to pay more. And I think if we really get going back to the question about the current commission and other things, we're thinking about how this looks in the future, this real way of thinking about how to adequately support community colleges. Certainly the Promise program is a wonderful step in that direction, but the resources needed for 500,000 undergraduates in the state of Maryland who potentially could be impacted by this will be significant. We know that poverty is growing. So I think we do need more support in that space, and certainly how to actualize the CADE commitment and to add more resources into that. But also realize that we're doing the best we can as an organization to be responsive, and to be a fair employer, to keep the impact away from students and still deliver high quality education. Thank you for the question.
And I would just add one piece that the board is really wrestling with. We just approved our budget this past month. As it moves forward through the process. And one of the challenges that we have is an expectation, because of that third criteria, that we will generally raise tuition each year. And as a board, we really struggle with that, since we know one of the biggest challenges that most of our students have is access to economic opportunity to be able to pay for those increases. And so we're kind of stuck in a rock and a hard place. There's an expectation that we're going to try to increase that tuition to keep that part of the third of the equation there, and yet we know that that's shutting the door to at least some of our students. And so when we think about that third, it's important to understand that. And we appreciate everything that we get from the state, but it still lags far behind where anywhere near where that third of it.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Oh, I'm sorry, Delegate Acevero, last question.
Yes, sorry. Good morning, Mr. Lord. Good to see you back. Good morning, Mr. Knapp. Echo my district colleagues' comments. It's always good to see District 39 residents out in Annapolis. Wanted to get your thoughts, Dr. Pollard, a little bit on this. I know we've looked at free tuition as we're looking at expanding that. What kind of impact that has on community colleges that are really at the front line of this conversation around tuition-free higher ed, like HBCUs, community colleges across the country also underfunded. And so I guess help us understand, as we are having a conversation to expand free tuition to more students, what kind of impact that has on Montgomery College, what kind of impact that would have on students, need the most.
Well, thank you for that invitation. One, I want to start doing is to start revising our nomenclature around these programs, because typically most promise programs are a last dollar. So that means a student is taking advantage of every free opportunity that's available to them in terms of grants and scholarships. And then the promise programs close the door to help support and pay for tuition and fees. So when people hear the word free community college or free education, they also forget the fact the students have to live. And therefore, as a result of that, the idea of housing, transportation, textbooks, food, all the things that is life and the complications of life is often not a part of traditional promise programs. So I think that while we have embraced this idea that the Community College Promise Program is an exceptional start in Maryland, and we've seen data across the country, whether it be in the state of Washington, Tennessee, several municipalities that have these types of promise programs, it has been a game changer in terms of creating access to higher education, particularly for those students who are oftentimes left behind, who would identify as either working poor, who have to make a choice between paying tuition and paying rent, and there's obviously not going to be an option there, so they don't pay tuition. So I think promise programs are significant. Expansion of those programs, and the thing that I would caution against, is expansion of those programs where you have where the ideal becomes so significant we forget the reality. So I have a couple degrees in English, and one of the things I had an English professor tell me, there's 7 master narratives in American literature. I don't remember all 7 of them. I remember one, because one of them was very important, and it was the ideal versus the real. And he talks about most canonical writing is really analyzing the ideal versus the real, and for the writer to really come to a recognition that the ideal isn't something that's ideal because the real contradicts it all the time. So what I would offer here is that we're looking to expand these programs. Don't get caught up in the ideal so much that we forget about the real, and we don't put enough money and resources behind it to make them work. So it's lovely to be able to say that we have a college promise program in the state of Maryland, and we're able to say that we have the potential to impact these numbers of students. Let's also be very intentional about understanding realistically what it takes to serve those numbers of students. Understand the complexity of those students' lives when we're talking about the difference between $1,000 or $2,000 in their existence. That to me is very important. And last but not least, it would be for naught if we don't have adequate pathways and ensure transfer from a 2-year institution to a 4-year institution. So I'll just put this out here. Maybe I shouldn't. Susan can't kick me. SB 740, love it. I think it was significant. It did not go far enough in forcing 2- and 4-year colleges to create more effective pathways, whether it be in common course numbering, ensuring the students enter at a junior status, that they don't have to replicate classes. Because if you pay for it once, why should you have to pay for it again? So that's just, I know I wasn't supposed to say that, but I just said that.
Great, thank you. I think we're going to move on with our agenda. Thanks for joining us. Great discussion. Let's bring up our mayors, including Mayor Newton, president of MML this year, I believe.
I'm Jerry Klipkowski. I am the mayor of the town of Colesville. Some people object that they say I'm president, but I like to say mayor, but that's another story. I am the product, as a matter of fact, of a junior college. I graduated from Fulton Montgomery Community College in Montgomery County, New York, which is actually in Fulton County. But anyways, I digress. I went to a 4-year school in upstate New York where I graduated from before I went into the Navy. Before I begin, let me just mention here, on the 19th of February, the Montgomery County chapter of MML, along with the Prince George's County Municipal Association, will be sponsoring a luncheon in this very room for all House delegates and senators and their staffs from approximately 11 in the morning till 1 in the afternoon. You're all, of course, really invited along with your staffs. Thank you for this opportunity, Delegate Corman, for allowing us to come before you. The big issues that we have are some of the issues that you've heard from our Sterling MML headquarters staff, Candace and Bill and Scott.
They are the ones for our strategic initiatives to suppose any attempt to preempt local authority, explore new methods of municipal revenue options, and consider changing the 5-year annexation rule. However, the big 500-pound gorilla in the room, as you know, and I have some sheets here which I can pass out to you, concerning 5G. The FCC ruling, which sides with the industry, basically is a usurpation of home rule by local municipalities as well as counties. We understand, and we are not against rolling out new technology. We accept that there's going to be 5G, there's going to be probably 6G, 7G, XG, we don't know. But it's going to continue. We're not against that, but what we are against is the idea that we have no say or ability to have an input with respect to where these things are put, what they look like, and just the way the FCC has come down. The FCC and the industry, the way the bill is FCC ruling is basically it says all municipalities are alike, and we are not. Poolsville is not like Chevy Chase, Kensington, Rockville, or Gaithersburg. Therefore, you cannot really apply one rule fits all. We would hope, and we look forward to negotiating with the industry to bring about a compromise that that maintains home rule while at the same time permitting 5G rollout. So it's not like we're saying we don't want to work with them all. We are willing to come to the table. However, the way we see it at this point in time is the industry wants it their way or no way. And we think that's rather the wrong approach to something that is so vital to our country, our state, to improve the lives, the quality of living of our citizens. And that's where we are on that particular issue. I can go on forever, but I won't. But as I am also a member of the American Legion Post 247, I have to put a plug in for veterans, and I would ask that you support all bills that would further veterans living in Maryland. I came here to testify last year with a lot of other veterans groups about the exemption of income tax exemption for veterans. Because a lot of these people have the skills that industry desires and wants. They're high-paying jobs, and many of these people, the same people, are entrepreneurs which create jobs within our state. So with that, I thank you very much for this opportunity, and I look forward to seeing you and working with you in the future, as does, pardon me for not introducing Bridget Donald Newton. Okay. I told you my mouth wasn't going to work right, but anyways, Mayor of Rockville, and also our esteemed head of MML this year, Mayor James Rusby and his wife, who is the mayor of Lakeville. And we thank you for this opportunity to come before you, and hope you all have an enjoyable day, and hopefully enjoy the snow as well.
Any questions for our mayors? Great, thank you, Mayor Newton. Thank the city government for sending us Delegate Blankovich's car as well.
Absolutely.
We will now turn to the next item on our agenda, Matt Klein, from the Department of Legislative Services. And we asked Matt to come, Executive Delegate Resnick's idea, to describe the local bond initiative process for veterans, returning members. The process has been slightly modified. Please. Yes, he's just passed his down. That'd be great, thank you. And for new members, obviously you might not know what this is at all, so we're going to bring everyone up to speed.
So I'm going to start by apologizing. First, I apologize that you got me instead of Carol Mim. I'm the capital budget manager, but Carol Mim, you should become familiar with her in our office. She handles most of the intake for legislative bond initiatives. The second apology is the document I've provided is oddly stapled, so don't ever let an analyst run the copy machine. This is the moral of that story. So I know Delegate Corman and a few of you, but I work primarily with the Budget Committee. So if I could get a show of hands of who is new to the legislature this year. Okay, quite a number of you. Great. So there, you don't know what we used to do in the past, or maybe you know a little bit. It used to require legislation to sponsor what we now refer to as a legislative bond initiative. During the interim, working with the presiding officers, this process was changed to no longer require submission of legislation. However, in the interest of full sunshine and making sure that the public can participate in the process and be able to keep track of what the legislature is doing and what they're requesting as far as local projects in their communities, the process still involves a rather robust set of documents that ultimately get read across the floor in each chamber. Okay? So the thing here to take is that, again, you're not sponsoring legislation. All right? So working through just the PowerPoint, I realize that my time is probably short. So I'll just try to leave you with a couple tips. First thing, page 2 provides a graph of the last several years of legislative bond initiative requests for funding. And I leave you with this because I think what you want to take from this is that the requests far exceed the available resources. So you need to think long and hard about what you're sponsoring and how much you're requesting. The legislature will not fund every project that is requested. And it is likely that what you've requested will not be fully funded. So the grantees organizations that you're working with are going to be able to have a rather robust funding plan that they can demonstrate to the committees when they're making their requests. And this kind of information is provided to the legislature in the form of a fact sheet, which is available online. So, page 3, just the typical ins and outs of what you can fund. These are capital requests. So the requests that you are making need to be capital in nature. They need to have a 15-year life. They need to satisfy some basic elements of what you can fund with capital. Acquisition, construction, design of something that's going to provide a facility to an organization to provide the good work to the people in that community, providing services, public services to the community. It must have, again, state and or local purpose, community centers, health facilities. In my time, I've seen a number of different types of projects, and one of the questions we get all the time is, can we fund this? Can we fund that? What I always tell everyone is that, well, the state can fund almost anything in the capital budget as long as it's capital in nature. However, not all projects are viewed or scored the same by the committees when they're making their selections. There are a number of guidelines that have been established over the years, and they are available on the General Assembly webpage. There's about a 40-page document that describes the entire process. So if you haven't looked at it, in your spare time you might want to, or have your staff look at it so they can become familiar with some of the basic components of what is considered to be an eligible project. For instance, we often get requests for from organizations to do things that, let's say, a community center that is part of an HOA. Again, what I will tell you is that yes, they can fund that, but it is not necessarily considered a priority of the committees because of the maybe lack of public nature of that particular facility. On page 4 is just a rundown of some of the things that the committees are looking for. They're looking to make sure that the project is ready to go, that there's adequate funding in place by the organization. There is an expectation that an organization is going to be able to certify their match to the Department of General Services within 2 years. There's a 2-year termination provision if that match is not certified. And I mentioned the Department of General Services because ultimately any authorization that finds their way into the bill is administered by the Department of General Services. And that's going to be the primary contact that grantee organizations are going to be making when trying to administer their project. Another thing that I tell people is that when a grantee receives an authorization in the bill, because all of these projects that are selected for funding ultimately find their way as line items in the capital budget bill. Going way back, when there were bills, the bills used to pass and have their own separate chapter law. But when I took over, we changed that process, and so all of those projects become line items. That process has not changed. Anything that is requested through an initiative will still end up being a line item in the capital budget bill. Organizations need to understand that the state provides funding on a reimbursable basis. Okay, so that means an organization needs to be able to certify not only that they have their match, but that they have the ability to be able to undertake the project. They will not get a check from the state on June 1st on the effective date of the bill. Okay, they will receive reimbursement when they can certify to General Services that in fact the expenses have been incurred, or they can set up a process where they get direct vendor payment. But nonetheless, there's some misconception by organizations when the bill has their project that in fact they will get a check from the state, and that is not the case. Committees are also, on page 4, I want to highlight this, they're also looking to make sure that an organization has sought out other funding sources from the state. The state operates a number of programs where projects could be eligible. For instance, a community health facility. The Department of Health operates a grant program where some of these projects could be eligible. What I've seen over the years is ultimately organizations are trying to cobble together money from a variety of sources. So when you're working with your organizations and they've requested that you sponsor a legislative initiative, not only are you going to want to ask what it is that they're asking of you and the amount to sponsor, but whether or not they've sought other funding sources and have they secured any of those other funding sources. The Department of Housing and Community Development is one of the primary benefactors, or one of the primary entities that is a benefactor of many of these grantees because of the type of programs that they administer. So page 6, this provides a summary of the request form. Okay. This is available online on the General Assembly webpage under the Capital Budget tab, as it's always been. This is a fillable PDF. This is the starting point for a member to request a legislative initiative of our office. Oftentimes, the members do not have all of that information when working with the grantee, so you'll need to work with the grantee to have all of that information completed, and then that document is then submitted to legislative services, and ultimately that produces what we now refer to as a legislative bond initiative document, page 7. Some of you at this point, since we're now several weeks into session, the last time I checked, I think we had over 180 project requests already entered into the system. Okay, so many of you are already familiar with this document. This is a one-page document. It provides a summary of what it is that you've requested. When you make a request, the automated system sends you an email notifying you that yes, you've made the request and it is going in the system. The next thing you're going to get is a green page. We put green for money this year. I think next year we're probably going to pick 2 colors because working with the clerks I realized that there's some confusion over what's a House initiative and what's a Senate initiative. So we'll pick 2 different colors. But you're going to receive a copy, and you're going to have 4 copies of this. And you need to sign that copy, and you need to return it to our office, the bill drafting office. We'll take those in. You need to check to make sure that in fact it encapsulates everything that you've requested. If there's something wrong with that document, you have 2 options. You can mark that document up. If it is marked up, our office needs to sign that, or the clerks will not process that and read it across the floor. Okay, so if you've marked up any changes, please make sure that when you return that to the bill drafting office, that they're aware that you've marked up changes. You can also call Carol Lynn if the document is completely wrong and has not been drafted in the manner in which you thought you were requesting it, and it can be canceled and a new document can then be sent back to your office. So there are processes for making changes. I did receive requests yesterday on something that I think all of you should know. Typically, if you were then want to make a change in your LBI after it's been introduced, that's really not possible, much like the bill. At that point, we just make note of that in our system. That, for instance, if the grantee says, no, I wanted a different amount, or no, I wanted a different matching fund requirement, we make note of that in the system. Okay? The only other way to do that would be to sponsor a parallel project, and then we would note that the first one is not the one that's being requested. Okay? So the process is very similar to a bill, ironically. This document that you sign gets read across in the proceedings, in the chambers. I receive emails, so I see when each one of these initiatives is getting sent out to the grantee. The process is automated, that it sends out an email to the grantee representative. They fill out a fact sheet. If you're not familiar with the fact sheet, it's about a 7-page document that is the responsibility of the grantee to fill out and complete. It should provide a full documentation of what the request is, both the purpose of the project, what the organization does in the community, and how they're going to use this funding in the nature to provide services to the community. It should provide a complete summary of what the organization anticipates is going to be their prospective funding for that project. Recognizing, like many local projects, it can take several years for an organization to actually be able to undertake the project, which is the reason why the statute provides not only a 2-year timeline for certifying the matching fund, but after a match is certified, the authorization is good for 7 years. Again, that's in recognition, and that's not to say the organization should take 7 years to complete their project and to draw down the funds. But it's in recognition that the state is often one of the first entities in, or is the gap financing that is needed for an organization to complete their project, and it may take several years for it to be completed. So after an organization completes their fact sheet and sends that into us, all of this is available online under the capital budget tab of the General Assembly webpage. You can track your project not only on this spreadsheet, as it gets introduced and as fact sheets get submitted through the system, all of that is available. You can just click a button and it will open that up. Your own individual your own individual legislator page will also allow you to track the process of each one of your requests through the system. So all of these requests culminate in what used to be called Bond Bill Saturday, is now going to be referred to as Legislative Bond Initiative Saturday, because I'm trying to get people to stop using the word bond bill. Legislative Bond Initiative, that's what we're calling it. We're working with the presiding officers for this year not only change that process. It used to be that the House and Senate would hold separate hearings. They're now going to hold a joint hearing in the joint hearing room, so that organizations only need to come and testify once. Okay? Trying to save some time, and again, just looking to provide efficiencies and better service to the community and to you. So ultimately, after Bond Bill Saturday, what happens? Most of you wait patiently and anxiously, waiting to see whether or not your item was selected for funding. You find out ultimately when the budget committees report out the capital budget bill, and the first thing I get is a number of phone calls. Was mine sponsored? And I say, well, yes, if you look on pages X through Y, you will see all the legislative initiatives and what's been sponsored and how much. Similar to the last several years, the House and the Senate each select their projects. So what that means is that a grantee can receive funding from both the House and the Senate. Okay, so if an organization hypothetically requests $200,000, and the House is moving first and they sponsor that project for $100,000, well, that's not the end of the road. Okay, the Senate's going to get the bill and they're going to make their selection based on how they decide to allocate the funding that they determine is going to be set aside for legislative bond initiatives. The last several years, the governor has not included in his capital budget an earmark for legislative bond initiatives. This year's budget does include an earmark of $15 million. So likely the House and the Senate will split that. They may decide to do a higher amount. And many projects over the years may not find their way into the legislative bond initiative section of the capital bill. They may find their way into the miscellaneous capital section of the bill. But to the organization and to you, that probably matters little. As long as it's funded in the dollar amount that's acceptable, that's what counts. Whether it's funded in the miscellaneous or in the legislative bond initiative section, the important part is whether it's been funded or not. And so those will be then taken up by the full chamber when the bill is up for voting, and then ultimately any authorizations find their way into the enacted bill, and at that point it is then in the hands of the Department of General Services, unless there are issues with the project grantee being able to administer that project, and this happens a lot. So we take in subsequent years prior authorization requests. Okay, so if you've got an organization that received funding, let's say 2 years ago, and the time is running out for them to certify their match, and they need more time, well, that is now referred to as a prior authorization. We also changed that process a few years ago. That no longer requires legislation either. There's an automated process that allows members of the General Assembly to request amendments to prior authorizations if, in fact, the grants that you had sponsored in prior years need some additional tweaking, more time, changing matching fund requirements, and whatnot. With that, I'll take questions.
Chairman Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know what would be really nice, and I've thought this every year, it would be great if the work product of the committees were put into a searchable Google spreadsheet, for example, with the column headings being sponsor, description, legislative district, county, amount, House and Senate, because oftentimes I've found myself, it would just be really super convenient to be able to search and sort stuff like that, and a Google spreadsheet costs nothing.
So we do have something like that available on the General Assembly webpage. So at the end, and I'll come talk to you and show you where that is.
Okay.
So at the end of session, when all of the projects are requested and then selected for funding, a spreadsheet is available on the capital budget tab of the General Assembly webpage, which provides a summary of who sponsored it, what the project name is, what the request amount is, how much the House funded, how much the Senate funded, whether or not they received miscellaneous funding, and then the total funding. And then that is categorized, and then that is available to be searched for prior years as well. Each document does not build on itself, so that may be an enhancement that is something that you may be looking for, but you can search prior year funding through this spreadsheet. When we roll into the next session, that spreadsheet that would represent this year's funding will then be available in the General Assembly webpage to look historically, and it goes back several years.
Is that at the very end of the process or in the middle? Because there's
Okay, so that is one of the enhancements. So now, as each project is introduced, not as it's requested, because it's not official until it's been read across.
Okay.
So the spreadsheet on the capital budget tab is live and interactive. As projects are introduced, the database feeds that spreadsheet and provides in-time updates as to what's been read across.
How long has this been the case?
The live and updatable, this is the first year of that.
Okay, all right.
Right. But the historical at the end of session, you could track that process, but only at the end. So now this allows you to track that throughout the process.
Great.
Delegate Essedera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had two questions. Delegate Barbie asked one of mine. You know you're an accountant when you start asking spreadsheets. But My second question was on page 2 of your presentation. It says that funding typically ranges from 100K to 250K. Now, I know we could put in a number of LEIs, but is the limit 250K, or we can put in greater than that, but usually the typical amount funded is 100K to 250K?
Yes, so there is no limit to how much you can request.
Right.
However, the larger the request, the less likely that it will be fully funded. So generally, you know, the committees are looking for project sizes that are, you know, within the $250,000 range. Again, that's not to say that projects that request $1 million they may still receive a full $1 million. So what I always tell people is request what you want. Okay. It's up to the committees to decide whether or not your project is worthy under the guidelines that they decide to evaluate those projects under. And it's up to the committees to decide whether or not to fully fund that project based on available resources. One of the things this year that you'll note when I give my fiscal briefing is that the last several years, the governor's budget has come in at a flat $995 million GO bond authorization level. Okay, and the Spending Affordability Committee has been recommending a higher level. Okay, and the committees have been funding the budget at that higher level the last several years. So that's provided a significant amount of resources for the committees to impart their projects that they would like, not only local projects, but whether or not they want to put more into school construction or community colleges or wherever else. This year, the governor has brought the budget in at the Spending Affordability Committee level. Okay, so that makes there's a little bit less play in the budget for the committees because, you know, as you probably know, the legislature can add to the capital budget. Okay, so the last several years there's been more for the committees to work with. This year there's a little bit less. There's going to have to be a little bit more creativity. We're kind of going back to the way things used to be, where if the legislature wanted to move things into the budget, they'd have to find things to take out, as opposed to just having a set amount of money that they can allocate based on the higher Spending Affordability Committee level. But to get to your question, request what you want, but temper that with the expectation that there's only so much available resources.
Delegate Wilkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify around the matching funds. I read you have a great comprehensive document online as well.
Yeah.
And the language in it sort of suggested that if you have matching funds, that it kind of makes your project more of a priority. But I want to be clear: are matching funds just a requirement? Is a group eligible if they don't have matching funds? If you can remind me if it's equal match and they have some funds, you can just talk a little bit more about the matching.
So yes, a member can request that a initiative be a straight up grant and that there be no matching fund. So that is an option. The committees generally look to see that an organization is going to have skin in the game and is going to provide some form of a match. You can request an unequal match though. Okay, so that's one of the options that's on the request page. So if you're requesting $200,000, but you're going to certify that the organization maybe can put in 50, you would be requesting an unequal match. You can also use real property if the property is owned by the organization as a match as well. However, you know, the committees do look at that with a little bit more scrutiny when using real property to make sure that first, there has to be equity in the property. Second, the entity needs to own the property or general services will not certify that match. And you can use in-kind services. And I want to caution people, in-kind services does not mean that members of the organization are out, building a retaining wall. It has to be from a certified contractor, either donated goods and services that is on a contract that can be certified by the Department of General Services. So that document does lay out a number of different ways in which an organization can request a match. But to your question, yes, you can request a grant. However, the committees are generally looking to see that an organization has some skin in the game.
Delegate Resnick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as a clarification, Matt, I don't know if you agree with this or not, when you say request what you want, really it's more request what you can justify.
Yeah, I think that would be a better way of putting it. one of the interesting things about the new process is that because they're no longer bills, there's opportunity for the presiding officers to more narrowly tailor what legislative body initiatives are going to be able to entail. When it's legislation, there are constitutional provisions and limitations on what can limit a member in their requests. Well, these are no longer bills, so over time we may see more discussions of how the presiding officers want to more narrowly tailor how these are going to be sponsored through the House and Senate rules. But yes, I think it's not my job to tell people what they can and can't submit. What I usually tell people is, like as you said, you need to be able to justify it. I've seen one for 30 million. Okay, and yeah, I know it's not that's an outlier, but it's not uncommon to see $1 million, $2 million, and it's not very likely that the organization is going to receive that. So you want to be able to help this organization, but if you overstate what you might be able to get them, that's not in the end going to necessarily help you.
And in reverse, just because it's a very small request doesn't also justify it either. So we've seen bond requests for $90,000 that we have also denied
because they're too small. Correct, and that dollar level, when they're that small, oftentimes the committees will look at that and say, how is it not possible that you can't fundraise to raise that small amount of money? Why do you need help from the state? Yes.
Any other questions or comments? Terrific, Matt. Thanks. We'll see you in appropriations.
All right.
Now you all know what you've been missing. We will go to our voting sessions. Chair Wilkins.
All right. Thank you so much. So the Land Use, Transportation, and Public Safety Committee met this week, and we moved favorable with amendments MC 16-19, Montgomery County Sale of Residential Property Septic Systems Outreach Toolkit. In terms of the amendments, we had one amendment that we rolled out in committee. So actually, to back up, what this bill originally did is that it required the seller of a property to provide the septic systems outreach toolkit to the home buyer during the purchasing process. So you probably remember the hearing on this bill. So the first amendment that the committee made, which you should have in your packets, what it does is it makes it so that it's a link in the contract. It just clarifies that it will be a link that will be included in the actual contract, so it makes it a little bit simpler. This was an amendment that the sponsor worked on with the realtors who had been involved in this process, so that was sort of a compromise that was developed. I do want to flag that there was a slight drafting error in the amendment. If you look on page 2 of your committee report, the very last paragraph where it says a contract for sale of residential real property, we actually need to remove the words "that is served by a septic system." We need to remove those words "that is served by a septic system." So that will change the amendment slightly to clarify that it's a contract for sale of residential real property, period, not specific. So didn't want to flag that change to the amendment that we passed. And I'd like to move the amendment.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Delegate Solomon?
Just one other point. I don't know, this is probably just a technical correction, but for the sale of residential, the paragraph 2 there.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment as slightly edited for typos? Signify by saying aye. Any noes? Any abstentions? Great. Delegate Wilkins?
All right. There was also another amendment to the bill where there was consensus from the committee. However, we did not have a visible amendment, so we decided to bring it to the full body for a vote. The sponsor is going to talk about and move that amendment.
Okay, so the other piece of the amendment, you should have a sheet that's in your packet that has the delegate clean amendment. What we're asking now is, in addition to referencing the website where the septic system toolkit would be available, is to provide the purchaser the option to initial that information. So we're just allowing for the initial, for them to initial that they have actually received this notification of where the septic information is. So a minor sort of addition to verify that the seller is getting, the buyer is getting the appropriate information about septic systems and where they're obtaining it, and this has been verified as well with the realtors that this would be something they can add to the forms. So we're asking if we could move that amendment. Do I need to read the amendment at all?
Nope. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion, Delegate Moon?
Sorry, I hate to have a protracted discussion about septic system. Notification.
But you're doing it anyway.
Yep. I might actually resist this amendment, and here's why. If you look at the other amendment we just did, it applies this provision to all real property contracts, I believe, not just those with septic systems, but the initialing would then move to be done by even houses that don't have septic systems, and I think that's a little weird. Why would we make people acknowledge that they receive information about septic system when the house doesn't have one?
Delegate Queen, you have a...
Well, I understand that, but I think from what I understood from the realtors, it's easier to just have one source form and to be able to initial that regardless. But that was the feeling. It's easier for them to not distinguish.
I don't have strong feelings about it, but that's
Great.
just what it is.
Thank you, Delegate. Chair Wilkins?
Mr. Chair, if Georgianne could provide the committee with sort of some more background information on for the first amendment, thinking that correction around the septic system. I think that could help clarify for everyone around removing the septic system.
Well, that was actually the intent, and that's actually in the language above. I had actually removed that was residential real property that is served by a septic system. That had been removed above, because that was the sponsor's intent of the amendment, was to make this then to apply to all real estate contracts in Montgomery County, as Delegate Queen said, because they said it would be easier to have one contract rather than to try to specify whether this house has a septic system, this house doesn't.
That's what the realtors feel is easier for them to just have one type of form.
No, that part I get. That makes sense.
Delegate Carlson, did you have a comment?
I just had a question. If the First Amendment that we passed basically says that if it's not included, it doesn't void the contract. So making someone initial means it will absolutely be included. So does that nullify the amendment that says if it's not included, it won't void the contract?
My understanding was talking to the realtors and the reason why they wanted that piece that says, if it's not, if it's not done, it doesn't void the contract, is for those cases where it's not a septic system in that house. So they didn't want somebody who didn't have a septic system in the house to be able to say, hey, I didn't get some information about this when you really didn't need the information about this, so therefore you wouldn't void the contract. Their feeling from the realtors is that they do have places within the document that talks about the need for septic systems, but they didn't want to, in this case where we're asking them to point to information that the EPA provides, they didn't want that to be a stumbling block for a house that didn't have it. They feel that they cover that sufficiently, but the additional initialing was something that was requested from the committee. which we agree is not a problem to us as a sponsor, as well as the realtors believe that other state in Tennessee, that would help them out in cases where it wasn't.
So there would be no ability by the,
So it wouldn't be any
by the
fines.
buyer to say, wait a minute, I didn't initial, so this contract.
It's void. They don't want that to happen.
Any other questions or comments? All right, on the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Please raise your hand so you can be recorded. Any abstentions or rules? Terrific. Chair Wilkins?
Visualize it.
All right, move the bill as amended.
Second.
Any discussion on the bill as amended? Great. All those in favor of MC 16-19 as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any rules or abstentions? Perfect. Bill passes. Okay, Chair Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Economic Development Committee has been working very hard again this week, and we passed 3 bills out unanimously. I thought it would be a great opportunity to have our new members present the bills. So just so folks have a sense of where we're at, we have 2 bills left in economic development. So Just Cause, which we will be hearing and discussing next week, and the DLC meeting bill are still left in the committee. And Alcohol Day is coming up on February 18th, so our hope is to get all the alcohol bills out by then. The 3 bills we're going to present, Delegate Stewart was going to do 119, but he couldn't be here today, so I will do that. And then Delegate Lopez will do 1419, and Delegate Shi will present 3019, which is the bill that was held last week in consideration for the Lukey Amendment. So with that, I will present MC 119, which is the Gaming Bingo Games bill. Those of you who were here last year, remember we passed this out of the delegation last year, and it again passed out of subcommittee this year. It's going to allow residents of 55 and older communities to participate in bingo games in the same way they can currently participate in mahjong and card games. It passed unanimously out of subcommittee. Move the bill.
Second.
Anybody want to second it?
Delegate Colson, you want to second? Any discussion? Great. All those in favor of MC 1-19, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions or rules?
Thank you. And then Delegate Lopez will present MC 1419.
Delegate Lopez.
Bill MC 1419 passed unanimously in our committee. This bill repeals obsolete provisions relating to gaming in Montgomery County. Specifically, the bill repeals state laws enacted in the 1920s and 30s, which prohibit almost all types of gaming in the county. Currently, there are comprehensive statewide prohibitions against certain types of gaming, and state laws that expressly allow religious and charitable organizations to conduct bingo and raffles in the county. A favorable report on MC 1419 would not change any current practice related to gaming in Montgomery County, including any permitting requirements and law enforcement efforts. The amendment corrects an error that would have taken out an allowance for performance for the benefit of a charitable organization and the permitting requirement for such performance. It was the intent of the county to continue current practice to allow for these performances and require permits. The amendment would keep both in place, and I will move on the amendment.
Second.
Any discussion of the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any rule or abstentions? Great. Delegate Lopez.
Yeah, and I will move on the bill.
Second.
Thank you, Delegate Kelly. Is there any discussion? Great. All those in favor of MC 14-19 as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions or rules? Terrific. And Delegate Shi.
Good morning, everyone. MC 3019 was voted unanimously by the Economic Development Committee, and this bill would essentially allow the community performing arts facilities that already have licenses to serve alcohol on premise to be also able to serve alcohol off premise at special events. So a good example is Biz Arts, which is located in the Rockland Town Center. Biz Arts is constantly trying to make its programming relevant and accessible to our changing demographics.
It also is trying to serve the immediate community around it. And the Rockview Town Center has high turnover of businesses. So oftentimes they have vacant storefronts. And Arts has been using some vacant storefronts for pop-up arts, painting classes, etc. In order to facilitate the painting classes, for example, or special events off-premise, Arts has to partner with a lot of business partners that are allowed to serve off-premise in order to do that. And the high turnover of the Rockview Town Center and some of the business partners make it very unreliable. So this permit would essentially allow Arts to do it as if it was its own campus. And it only applies to current license holders of community performing arts facilities, which in Montgomery County would apply to Arts and Black Rock Center Film Arts. And the permit holder has to notify the Board of Licensing Commission 2 weeks in advance of the event. The licensing fee, the license is annual, so every year the licensee has to renew the license for $200 annual fee. And the same, it has been applied to other class licenses, like the liquor, wine, and liquor stores tasting events, or country club tasting events, and off-premise events. And the Board of License Commissioners can revoke the permit anytime. So that's, in essence, what the bill would do.
Would you like to move the bill?
Yes, I would like to move the bill.
Second.
Any discussion? Just for the benefit of the delegation, Delegate Lukey texted me this morning because he couldn't be here, that he's fine letting the bill move. We were honoring his special order last week. Any further discussion? Great, on the bill, MC 3-19, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions or rules? Terrific. Announcements. Committee announcements, Chair Kelly.
We will be back at Economic Development 9 o'clock next Thursday, same location, 218, to deal with the DLC naming bill and the just cause fiction.
Chair Queen.
The Education, Election, and Housing Committee will meet today noon for discussion and voting session and from 2:18.
Chair Wilkins.
Tuesday after the session, room 318, so please note the location change, 318 for the land use committee, give after session on Tuesday.
Chair Carr.
The Metro Washington Committee will meet on Monday at 7 p.m. to discuss 2 bills.
In room 218?
In room 218.
And welcome back to delegation. Thank you, Vice Chair Carr. Please remember to turn your purple folders to Sarah. Please remember to contribute your $100 Sunshine Fund to Sarah. If you've not done that yet, take Venmo, check, cash. Any other announcements? Great, we are adjourned. Thank you all.